Yeah, so this presentation is going to be kind of part like just educational food forestry, and then part kind of just to share my garden, which is called Inwood Eden. It's Inwood, I say it like that because it's on social media, so you can find it on Facebook or mainly Instagram or YouTube, making videos there. Um, Not very professional, just amateurish, but there's a lot of really great content that's appropriate for Houston. Probably the biggest difference why I'm here in front of you is because we're so unique here in Houston, and so being able to have those subtle differences in our food forestry is kind of valuable. So yeah, so I'll show you some images in the presentation from my garden and how it's evolved, and it hopefully will just be kind of like inspirational to help you see what's possible here in Houston, and maybe some of the things that can help you really leverage your energy and get some productivity. So we're going to fly through pretty fast just because that's my style. And so here we go. Food forestry, simple, growing food in a way that mimics the forest. The core of that is that the forest is stable. The forest is the ecosystem where there's the most moisture, where there's the most diversity, where there's the most life. So as you get away from forests like grassland, there's a lot less diversity. It's a lot less brittle. You have, more fire, more dry season, things like that. So the reason we want to cultivate a forest around us is because that's where the most life can thrive and prosper. So it's all about nurturing through the brittleness into that abundance. So I really like this image, but just recognizing that we make connections with everything around us. So every plant is a potential connection, a potential awareness, potential understanding. And the more we're able to really connect and understand them, the more we're able to allow them, because we know them, they're familiar. Then we know, okay, this plant's not going to be a danger, or I can manage it in this way, and then those subtle learnings of relationship with different plants allow us to have our food surrounding us all the time. It's just this really beautiful energy and connection you can kind of capture, in this image of plants that all have a value. So it's a whole paradigm shift. So I'm really a huge fan of messy gardens. Gardens that have intention and have structure, and like they're thoroughly designed by the human hand, but at the same time there's an element of allowing that is lost in the paradigm of society that we live in, of allowing things to be wild, allowing things to expand, allowing things to go through this phase of out of control before we bring it back into control. So it's not necessarily that one is right and the other is wrong, but it's that we fluctuate between the two. There's some times when your garden is supposed to be a wild, crazy mess, and then you will get it back into ship shape and order, and it won't stay that way. And so it's kind of like just understanding and embracing the core patterns of life is just to, release of that. So food forestry, and I know there are other like webinars and talks on permaculture and everything, but it's like there's so much overlap you're going to see and feel. It's like a food forest is the epitome of permaculture. There is nothing I could say that would be any higher in terms of like these, agricultural systems, regenerative agriculture. All those things are a far cry from the reality of what permaculture, its founders and their definition and all of it was about. Is none of that. It's not regenerative agriculture. No, it's food forestry. It's returning our connection to the land, and it's returning our food and our everything to a more hyper local, a more immediate community level of engagement. So yeah, regenerative, abundant, caring for people and the planet, and returning everything back to that forest, back to the system. Whew, see, I told you I go fast. Good thing you got the slides. So these are the 12 permaculture principles. And if I was to say, like foundationally, one thing that you could do that would have the most lasting and greatest impact is just to internalize these principles. No joke. Like there's being told what to do and all these little details, and you can plant the tree this way and you can plant. But if you understand the principles of observing and interacting before you know, go and start making changes, you understand the principles of setting a limit or being open to feedback, all these, this list will shift the way you interact with the ecosystem, with the other living things, with life itself. So we're going to go through this. You know, you don't have all the images, but we're going to go through them with images and just really, I'm going to try and illustrate using my garden how all of these principles played a huge role in shaping it in what it is today. So yeah, so that's basically the meat of what you're going to get out of this is, you know, images from the garden. This is my garden. I bought it in 2013, January 2013. And so it's 7 years, well, over 7 years now. And it is 2/3 of an acre. It was a blank, you know, empty lot that had a water well pumping station on it. It was cheap because of that. It, you know, didn't have a real good house pad or anything developed like that. And so I bought it with the intention of gardening and growing food. And so the first permaculture.
What's the name of your neighborhood?
Inwood Pines is where I live, or where the garden is, and I live nearby. So if you know the Inwood Golf Course, it's you know, Northwest Houston, just north of Acres Homes. So when it came to observing and interacting, it was like immediately what I wanted to do is just take in and connect with land. And all of you guys that own property have felt this to varying degrees. So there was a lot of time just exploring what was there, taking stock of all the dewberries and the swamp sunflowers and wildflowers, things like that. And the first interactions were basically just bringing mulch onto the site. So just tons and tons of bags of leaves, also broken concrete, also tree trimmings, also just anything that was being discarded to me had value. So we just transitioned. So observe and interact. It did happen, I promise. And then the second permaculture principle is to catch and store energy. When we are just moving through life, there will be energy flows, and it's, you know, just like honey for the bees, like the nectar flow, it comes in waves. And so if you are open, if you're not locked in to, you know, a really rigid schedule or a really rigid mindset, you know, way of seeing things, you will be able to catch these flows of energy much better. I think that's what you're going to see in the following slides, like the garden itself. A lot of it is because I have a lifestyle, a life that is open to catching all of this energy. It's trash, you know. I love just trash and picking up people's trash. And anyway, I hope somebody's laughing at that. But yeah, free things like broken concrete and logs and mulch. And this is a carport that I got for free off Craigslist. And it was like, it was second year I got it. It was just awesome for catching water. So catching and storing energy, you know, here's even more like, I could have filled up 10 frames of slides with how much stuff. The chain link fence was all the trash, you know, like just stuff comes along if we're open to it. So if you are in an urban food forest kind of situation, you know, that's a big part of it, you know, opening up to that kind of energy. This is just an image just to show you how quickly I was catching and storing energy, because this is less than a year from when I first got it to when we started filling it up with stuff. And even the soil that's in those raised beds I got for free from somebody doing like redoing the lawn down the street, and the guy had a dump trailer, and it was like, it was perfect. So it's just, you know, opening up the awareness. All of those raised beds are just free pallets, all of the logs, all of the, like everything. It was just, I had got a truck, I had a trailer, and I collected materials and rearranged them. And that's how it was working.
And you just put compost on top of that and was able to grow from just yard soil?
Yeah, field soil is very misunderstood in how abundant and fertile it is. The
field soil meaning it's not soil on a suburban lot that they've shipped in that's really valueless. It is an actual field that's been found.
No, it's actually exactly what you said at first. It is this
Oh,
soil.
interesting.
So my site, it had basically your typical heavy clay Houston soil, but it had massive sections where there was basically like 4 to 6 inches of bank sand leveling fill. And it ended up being this really great boon. I don't want to get too, like, I know I got to rush through a
Sure,
lot,
down in the weed,
but I had more growth than what would have been possible without that sandy fill in some areas. Just as far as like the heaviness of the soil beneath. But
right. But in those beds,
in
you
those
just
beds
had
is, so field soil is just
dirt.
any soil that is mineral based predominantly. So it's anything that you would probably call clay soil or native soil or anything like that. Most of our native soil, which field soil is kind of synonymous with, is silty clay. It's not like awful clay, like super slick or super heavy anaerobic clay, but it's
Yeah.
pretty heavy soil. And so that's
Okay.
what
And then you put compost on top?
No, I planted straight into field soil. And these, I wish I could share all the images of how massive these crops were. Like we had beets,
Yeah.
this big.
Okay, I'll have a side conversation with you about that because that's contrary to what I know. But
I know,
go ahead.
and it's just it's a misunderstanding. You just grow in them differently. When you have a organic, or it's really a soilless media that's based in pine bark and peat moss and all those things, the way you grow in it is different than when you grow in a field soil like this was. But yeah, let's so obtaining a yield is such an important permaculture principle. If you do something, you want to get a yield out of it. My garden these days is yields are just like all over the place, but it's a variety of things. So like you can see, there's just tons of things that I grow in the garden and have grown over the years. And there are seasons to everything. There's basically there's always something nice to find and eat. Like whenever somebody comes for a visit, I can usually find a fruit or something cool to share. So obtaining a yield, and maybe your yield is also just something like aesthetics and community and all these other things. So principle number 4 is to set limits and accept feedback. And it's more like a self-regulation thing in our paradigm, our society, where everything's pushed to need to expand in order to survive. It's really dangerous. And so in your permaculture, food forest, whatever, being able to set a limit for how fast you're going to expand, or set a limit for how big you're going to get. These two images you're seeing is the first is you're seeing the holes dug. So that was feedback. When I bought the property, I wanted to grow vegetables to sell. I wanted to be a market gardener, and that was my background. I knew I could do it and sell a lot of food. And so what happened was we went to get the water hooked up, and he couldn't find it. So he dug that other hole and couldn't find it. And so the water line was out in the middle of that circle of the cul-de-sac, and it was going to be like over $5,000 street cut to get the water hook up. And I'd already spent basically all that I had on this dig, so it was this big redirection. Like, do I wait and save up just to get water to try and do some intensive annual production, or do I go with what I can do right now, which is collect bags of leaves? And so I went with that feedback, and it totally redirected the garden into much more permaculture than it would have been otherwise. And then the second is the limits, more feedback, but just that I got feedback about being too messy and have too much junk, and so it helped me to limit how messy it got, or limit where it was wild and where it was uncontrolled and stuff like that. Another really important limit, this image is about setting limits, was I never got the water hooked up, and so everything in my garden is dependent on me physically bringing it water by hand in buckets, or the rain. And so this was a very nice, it was actually a jaboticaba that died because it didn't get water, it didn't get enough water. And it really died not because it didn't get enough water, but because I planted it too late in the year. So that adjustment was just, I have to finish my planting, kind of like by April 1st. If I'm doing any perennial, it's February, March, or not at all. And so that was a big, limit. And so we're already, so they're all kind of connected. You see, there's my source of water, and that was all I used for most of the first year, because I ended up digging the pond at the end of the first year. But it was just a creek at the end of the street, and I would throw water in the back of my truck. So you can start, however you can with the resources you can. Most of you guys are going to have irrigation, so it's not a huge, but just knowing that it can be done. So permaculture principle that comes into play is using and valuing the renewable resources, the ones that are going to be there, you can get more of. It's like, I had access to this water, it was there. I have access to leaves, I know more are going to fall every year. I know, so designing a system around those kind of inputs means that it's more stable, and I can turn those leaves and that grass clippings into some really great soil, some really great fertility. And then another, is community. As far as sustainable, renewable resources, when you invest and design a system around, strong community, it is definitely going to be there for you later on. It's something where you can maintain it. Permaculture principle number 6, no such thing as waste. Never let organic matter leave your site, ever. I don't have all the images, but just the amount of trees and branches and things that I have chopped down, cut up, and just covered with mulch, covered with leaves, and allowed to feed back into the soil is just tremendous. It's amazing. Like, I got full on, like, I know how much the earth, the soil can eat. Like, literally, like, it's like, feed me, see more. But the earth, once it gets going, these decomposers, basically, I'm talking about like the mycelium, the fungal network, but also all of the insect life that works on it, all the worms, like, once they ramp up, they can, really make organic matter disappear. So no waste. The black trash bags are still, SPBs, bags of leaves. Doesn't matter if they're decomposable like below or not. The water buckets, that was just sort of like a heavy trash, pile find, where it's like, oh my gosh, this is great. It'll be cold weather protection around the trunks of the citrus or something. So no waste. And then no waste is in chickens and livestock could be a part of your system, where you're able to take a waste from something else, maybe a trimmings from a tree, and feed it into the chickens or feed it into something else. So my chickens eat a lot of grass just from random bags of leaves from the curb. So yeah, no waste. Let's see, the next one, design from patterns to details. And this is just to not get bogged down, on having this one thing or this one way, really trying to stay open to the larger patterns. And so where that came into play most in my garden was with the ponds and with where I placed them. So after that observation and interaction, I saw really clearly on my site, there were 2 spots where water just stayed. Like this pond image you're seeing where we had the bobcat just rented for a day and dug this pond. This was literally a swamp where water would stand for like a week or longer, at about like 2 or 3 inches deep, just in the grass. And so we dug our pond right there, and it caught runoff from the massive field behind and was able to fill up and stay full with every big rain. So it was just from that observation of like, hey, this is the right spot. And it's been pretty good. It does go dry from time to time, and so I have to restock it with mosquito fish, but it doesn't go dry every year. But I say, maybe every other year in August until the hurricane comes. It's like creeping along. So I have ambitions to dig it better, dig it bigger.
Just curious, financially, you quit saving up the $5,000 to get the water. How much did it cost to dig that pond?
$600.
Well, that's inexpensive, so I see why you did that.
Yeah, it was. It helped me also. We rented that skid steer you see in the image for the day, and not only did it dig the pond, but it also dug the pond with the blue liner there, most of it, and then it also moved probably 20 yards of mulch that had been stored up in the middle of the driveway. So yeah, I did a lot of work that day. But yeah, working from an overall pattern, like if you get a layout for your food forest and be thinking about your clearing spaces or your flows or your utility access, your compost, your decomposition system, those are larger patterns that if you're building a food forest, you want to design in from the start. You want to have that, from a pattern sort of approach. Permaculture principle number 8. All right. Deep breath. I'm trying to slow down. Integrate rather than segregate. And this is one of my favorite permaculture principles. It is basically, it has to do with, all those connections and how much we can be connected to all these different systems, all these different things. So my forest is, one where chickens run under the fruit trees. So it's, fully integrated there, but it's integration in terms of bees. There's 12 colonies out there. Integration in different crops, you're trying to get more close together. So the more we get away from linear systems and linear system thinking, the more we're moving towards this permaculture food forest energy. So like this is the chickens run, where they do get locked in, and you'll see integration as in you have muscadine grapes that are going to fall for the chickens to eat. And these years actually grows a lot of passion fruit as well. So passion fruit, the chickens know to open them up, and the chickens are integrated into the decomposition system. So they're not only eating grass in the bottom, you can see, but they're also creating really great compost. So I harvest out of the chicken run whenever I have a big need. I usually put it into one of my garden beds. But it's really a valuable, compost is definitely a commodity, and high quality stuff there, maybe harvest once or twice a year. And then more integration, it just requires, it requires problem solving. Like this is the integration page where it's like, okay, I've got tomatoes, but I've got them right in front of a beehive. I got to figure out how to harvest, or I've got to protect the cool weather crops from the chickens. And because I just had collected stuff or just had things around, there was always some way to meet the needs of both. I think that was the fun challenge. Like integrating my snake system and chicken system. You see, they get along just fine. They're both laying eggs like up a storm, and yeah.
Did you say snake system?
I love rat snakes.
Rat
They
snakes?
are.
They do
Yeah.
eat rats. I've seen one at the Arboretum devouring a rat right in front of me. Is that why you have them?
I have them because they like to eat chicken eggs, and so just my craziness and my love of snakes, I'm a huge snake fan.
Okay.
Was that I buy grocery store eggs and just mark them with a Sharpie. And so it's been really great. The rat snakes can go out and eat all the grocery store eggs, and then the other chicken eggs get collected as soon as
interesting.
twice a day, so more frequently. But
so
yeah,
this is not your pet rat snake? That's just a visiting rat snake?
It is not a pet. No, it's wild, but they're more and more familiar. The garden actually has been really cool. I've have connections with rabbits that are kind of similar, that are wild, but actually, hang out at our feet sometimes, and that kind of energy.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. All right. Permaculture principle number 9 is small and slow solutions. And I think one that kind of connects to this is growing from a place of connection. So this image right here, I want to kind of like let it sink in, because this is the main like concrete pad, like right on the side of the driveway. So that big bush on the left side is a live oak tree, and there's actually right dead center, there's a little citrus that's all covered up in tall grass from the summer. But just this area, it kind of just evolved gradually over time. I would get another load of broken concrete and I would add it in, or I would just come in with a little pulse, and just recognizing that these projects that I've seen where there's a big capital investment and there's a big energy investment, huge, all at once, like an energy dump, where 20 people come in and just, go crazy on a site, it actually is not as stable. It is not as healthy, strong, or abundant a year later, because what a site needs to grow, what anything needs to grow, is kind of a consistent, stable interaction, a stable pulse. So growing small, growing slow. I wish, one thing I learned, I actually lost quite a few. You saw that image from my first year of all that material and all the gardens and all that. I went too hard too fast. And in hindsight, if I had just stuck with like 5 fruit trees a year, I would have been in the exact same spot of going like, 10 and then losing some and then not having space, or just, there was a urgency that ended up not being, as efficient as it could have been. So, maybe it's, somewhere in between, depending on your size, how much you want to expand. But it's good to have a back 40. It's good to have areas where you're not necessarily going into them right away, where you're taking kind of like a nucleated approach. In fact, this area, if you remember from the earlier image with the mulch going down that first year, this was my core. I'm going to plant, peppers and wild things, vines to run over in this area. This is where I had put the most effort into the soil, things like that, for permaculture kind of forest garden. So this is that exact same area. I think probably a year later with a little more concrete, and the seasonality in my garden is just really tremendous. Every fall it's going to look like this, every after the summer. And the reason for this is actually a really good one that could help you all be successful. Summer is our winter in a way. Summer can be our harshest time of year, where the environment is the most brittle. And because it is the most brittle, excuse me, it is the worst time of year to do disturbance, to expose soil, to disturb wildlife. If they're in the stress of a dry spell and you go in and you knock down the grass or knock out those few flowers, it's like you're putting a greater reduction on the insect population or things like that. So waiting till the rains come, waiting till the temperatures cool off, and then I'll come in with a massive pulse and I will cover everything in mulch. I try not to cut the grass. I try to just bend them over and cover. I try and just just treat it like an additive process, and you're basically adding except on top of what you want to stay. So you're doing like positive reinforcement, because you're feeding soil, nurturing the things you want, instead of negative reinforcement of trying to rip out this and rip out that. And because of that simple shift, it's a foundational shift. And because of that, you're going to have double the expansion, because the pattern, like law of mirroring, law of attraction, is just that if you go for the negative, if you go for I want to remove, I want to resist, you're resisting growth, you're resisting expansion. So that's a good lesson that ripples through society in a million ways. But yeah, small and slow, and just pulsing. Those are core patterns. This is this image I put in here because this area I did not touch for like the first 2 years. This was just the back thicket. It had mulberry trees and dewberry brambles. And then finally it was time to like, all right, I'm going to take this on. And so all that branches is like maybe an ash or hackberry, and the mulberry, like tons of sunlight, because I was going to plant a persimmon, or maybe there's definitely a pineapple guava there in the middle. But basically I was claiming it to plant the new fruit tree, but just that there was a pulse to it. It wasn't an immediate thing. Number 10, use and value diversity. And I feel like we've already covered it, but it's so important that, we're here again thinking about diversity. And it basically it gives you stability. Diversity gives you, a way to meet your needs when one thing falls through. When one thing dies, there's just a myriad of other things to take its place. So I have a horticulture background, so I was all about the fruit trees and the cultivars at first. I wanted that diversity. I wanted just interspersed and variety, but I also wanted to maintain and nurture the diversity of the forbs, the herbaceous ground cover stuff. You'll see in the image there, you got Rudbeckia and Gaillardia. Those two I never brought onto the site. Those were there
You
from the
can
very
use your
beginning.
mouse to point to stuff if you want.
Oh, okay. This is blanket flower, Gaillardia, and this is a little Rudbeckia. And or maybe it's Mexican hat. I don't know. They're similar. But those wildflowers were there from the start, and so I would work around them and intentionally allow them to reseed and learned about. I learned so much about Gaillardia, just getting to watch it grow up in the driveway, seeing how it thrived in the most compacted places, and it could never handle the leaves. It was one where would never show up where I was putting down mulch, but wherever there was bare ground, it would show up and just persistent and full bloom, for huge chunks of the year. So really cool just learning about the plants as we go. And then you'll see a lot of this tall skinny thing, that's goldenrod. And goldenrod, like some other plants, the Wedelia and the pepper vine, but certain plants are basically stress tolerators, kind of like blackberry is one as well that was similar. But because my maintenance interaction was so dependent on mulch. Basically, it was a mess. I was just going to cover it all with bags of leaves. Well, goldenrod is super unfazed by being covered like that. It's a root suckering, a lot of energy underground, just a plant that thrived in that. So this is like a running goldenrod, but it just ended up kind of going everywhere where there was enough sun.
Just
Right.
a time check, it's about 5:35.
Oh, cool. Am I going fast enough for everybody? They say slow down or speed up. No, that's good. I appreciate it. So permaculture principle 11 is use and value the edge and the margin. So the edge is a concept that I also is really dear to my heart, and I hope you get into it and really understand it. So the edge is, it's just a barrier or a space between two different, areas, elements, forces, flows, waves, and edges are where all of life happens on an edge. So like if not all of life. The concept of edge is imperative to life, but there's an abundance of life. There's a concentration of life at the edges. So like the edge of the forest and the grassland is where, there'll be double the density. The edge of the ocean and the shore is where there's double the density of diversity of life. The edge between the river and the bank, the edge between the, I don't know, even the desert and the mountains or whatever, like there's going to be more life concentrated on the edges at that scale, but there's more life concentrated at the edges even at small scales. So the edge of the log and the ground is where there's going to be more life. The edge of the concrete is where the toads are going to hunt. On the edge of that, where there's a flat concrete plain, right, a lot of good hunting ground, and then there's a mulch bed, toad's going to live in the mulch bed and hunt on the concrete. And so once you really internalize and understand the concept of edge, you can bring more of it into your garden, because edge is all about the difference. And so if you have nothing but edge, you essentially have no edge. Like if you had one stump, it's very valuable in the middle of a forest, right? And then all the toads live under it and it's like home to everything. But if it's a log pile, then it gets interacted with differently. It's no longer as valuable as an edge maybe in that way, and maybe it's more of the lizard's hunting ground, and they're living up in the trees because it's an edge between tree and logs. But basically getting into edge so far that you're seeing it as like an artful kind of thing where you're sculpting edge for optimum life, or even for the life that you want to foster. But the core edges that I think you really should bring into a food forest is the ground plane edge. So these are called swales. You've heard of them. Digging swales creates an edge that then catches water, stores it. but they don't have to be this long, continuous thing. For most of my trees, I dug a little pocket hole about 4 to 6 feet off to the side, because that was creating diversity. That was creating edge, variety. I just backfilled it with mulch and leaves or logs or whatever. And that, because I'm, again, dry land, no irrigation, would catch a little more water, hold it a little longer. It was a place where their roots could go for fertility, things like that. So that little bit of edge was really helpful. And then also nurse logs, for sure. That's probably the easiest edge to create. Like if you're planting a fruit tree, go and find a big log and set it right next to it. It's like a no-brainer win. Like there's just so much positive. You can even, if you get nice ones, they're garden seats. But the amount of decompaction that happens under that edge, the amount of fertility that's released over time from that edge, the amount of life it brings in and concentrates where your fruit tree needs it. They're just going to benefit from the roaches, the earwigs, the worms, everything that is going to gravitate under a big heavy log. So that's really valuable edge. Then I think the marginal comes into play in this image with just that this is all free stuff that I either got off Craigslist or got off the curb. So many times, just concrete on the heavy trash piles. And all of it has found its use. A lot of it went into flooring in places, or it helped me with the heaters I use for the winter. It helped me like protect the chickens from, so valuing the undervalued, valuing the marginal land, which is what this whole property was. Those are permaculture principles that are important. And then the last permaculture principle is creatively respond to change. And so this is one that I don't have a good image for, but basically bees multiplied. I needed more room for more bees in my stands. I need, so as things grow and change, you'll have opportunities to rethink your plan and just respond with thoughtfulness. All right, so that was a little bit into my garden. I have more images at the end if we have time, but we're going to get into food forestry again and some concepts. So this is stuff, probably you could find this online, but food forests are more productive because of the vertical layering. You can see the sunlight there. It's got so much more depth to penetrate. So you got vines and shrubs and trees all interacting. So this is going to help you as far as thinking about the layers, but it's a lot to know all the plants. So really take your time. Hopefully my organization of them can help. But we don't have a lot of food in our high emergent canopy. Pecan and mulberry are good, but we have a lot of small trees that provide food. So these are good for a mid-layer, low-clot pear persimmon, fig, grape. The understory is a lot more, diverse. We have a lot of small trees that you can use. Some of them must have full sun, so that's why I kind of separated the two. But obviously, there's a lot of overlap. So if you're feeling critical, you're spot on. I agree. They could be, it could be switched around. But can't grow pomegranates except in full hot sun, and the others like it as well. And then here's some, just diversity. So after you've gotten familiar, let's say you're just getting to know some of these fruit trees, start with those first couple on the list. These are, ones that are less for food and maybe more for aesthetics or shrubs, but Turk's cap actually and beautyberry, those are, go-to natives. Those are really good ones that should be pretty high on the list. So definitely bring those into your food forest. And then here's just more, these basically I was rolling them off. These are just what popped into my head. But for a diverse understory, small tree, these are a lot of plants that I would recommend. And then we got ground cover plants. I'm a huge fan of longevity in Okinawa, the Gainuras. Those are easily propagated from cuttings, and I basically put them in my garden by tossing them onto peeling back the mulch, tossing them on the ground, covering them with mulch, and then putting a branch so the chickens wouldn't scratch it all up. So it's very easy to propagate. Some of these others are also very spreading, like Wedelia. That if you introduce that to your garden, you got to expect it to really spread and own that space. So do some research on all of these and where they might be, a little better for introducing. Root crops is just another one of those layers, thinking about how you could pack a different yield in. So if you have the really urban food forest where it's like a backyard kind of dense situation, you might, try some sunchoke. You might try a root crop. The only one that can really, like the gingers and the onions and the turmeric, can go under the trees. Sweet potato, sunchoke, and cassava can't. So the list can always be divided more, clarified more. And then there's just tons of vines, tropical vines we can grow. This is a really fun part of it. So give them space, let them go. That, I just can't speak highly enough of a lot of these. Cinnamon yam is a smaller yam, so it's very manageable if you got a small space. So would wing bean would be a smaller one. And then Mexican gherkin, it's nice because it's super easy, super weedy, but it will reseed on you with mild winters. It'll come back from the roots. It'll be prolific is my term for invasive, so I just don't like that word as much. So careful of the prolific ones. And then more vines just for flowers and bring in the hummingbirds and the bees, appreciate them. Obviously some on the list you might not want to bring in, but I put greenbrier there because it's edible, and Virginia creeper is not edible, and I don't know why it's on there, but you might want it for, biomass or habitat or some other thing. So next slide. The next part to think about is when we're designing with food forest, we have to design in succession and the element of time. So what you're seeing is me getting rid of trees that I had to phase out over time because I overplanted, and you will overplant too. And the biggest thing is, like, you just gotta own up to it when the spacing is not right, or when a plant's suffering or struggling because you've put them in too dense, or you're not meeting their needs. It's like you gotta make those hard decisions, and that's a huge part of it. So all these plums and the fig that came out, they're all still alive. They're in my friend's garden, and it was nice to give them away. They survived just fine. But think about how you might have a lot of support species, right? Here's some support species. You might let a bunch of ash trees or Chinese tallow, let it grow up. It's gonna super help your garden, but that's a super easy tree to phase out over time. Chinese tallow, like, you literally can just, pry bar a couple pokes at the roots and you'll knock it out or rip it out of the ground, or you just cut it down for biomass. But phasing and time is an element. So these trees will help. A support species for my garden is anything that grows. If you have irrigation, if you need it to be more maintained or manicured, sure, it might be a different approach, but mine is very much the wild garden. And then another area of phasing was, I did not, so those hexagon beds you saw at the first, I tried annual veg, right, without irrigation, and by year 2, I realized, no, it wasn't worth the time investment. So I didn't bring any annual vegetables back in for like another 2 years. I phased it out completely. It was just about establishing fruit trees, maintaining what was there. And so our area of focus is going to change. Our energy input of, like, now I'm tapering off on, well, planting. I'm hardly doing any planting anymore. It's just maintaining. And then the last element that is a concept I really like or want to share is that of a pulse. And so when it comes to your garden and your space, I hope you will take the time to picture it as a child, as a living thing, like that you are nurturing its growth and expansion of. And a pulse is something that gives stability, right? The plants, it's the day and the night pulse, or with us, our heartbeat. We have the seasons. There's all kinds of pulses in life and in nature, but that the pulse of coming in and interacting and then going away is really powerful for driving expansion. So pulse, it pumps blood. Pulse, helps kids grow. The pulse of eating and then resting. And I learned this really deeply working with Urban Harvest in the school gardens, because there it was a once a week interaction. And I learned that it actually was really valuable to have that space in between for things to grow without, attention or care. And so, yeah, so think about the pulse in your garden. How are we doing on time? Wow. Anyway.
You got about, 5 minutes or so. We're going to leave some time at the end for questions.
All right. So Think about the type of food forest you're going to do. Basically, it's going to deal with canopy cover. So, like the forest garden, what I call forest garden, is more like an English cottage garden with some fruit trees. The polyculture orchard, that is, so like here, forest garden, a lot of diversity in the ground layer. The polyculture orchard is like you got some space and you need to be able to maintain it, and you don't have a lot of time, so you're going to mow in between, or you're going to really just focus on establishing the fruit trees and not a lot of gardening at the herbaceous layer. That's your polyculture orchard food forest. And then the last one would be like a climax forest, where you're intending to allow the trees to reach their final size and allow for full-on canopy coverage, and that's going to be a lot more shade, and eventually your biology is going to be very different if you go that route. So choosing that from the start can help you be successful. And just remember that the plants are the ones do the work. So I know I started with other plants, but this list right here is probably the important one for just choosing trees for your food forest, because this list is short, and it's better because it's short. You don't want to grow everything. You want to grow what is easiest, what is strongest, what is most appropriate for Houston. And that's what this list is. These are trees that can do it on their own. These are trees that are, endemic and, or native, some of them, and naturalized here. So then there are other trees that you might have to do more care in. You might have to cold protect your citrus. You might have to cut out fire blight on your pear. All this list, there's an element of care involved that people can fail at. It's pomegranates on there just because it's not very productive. We get too much humidity in the fall. And then there's also a massive list of the subtropicals that we can grow. So if you're into cold protecting, or if you're more in the city, then totally look into them. They're awesome and have value. Here's some of my cold protection efforts, just recognizing that I'm on the north side of Houston, outside the loop. And so establishment for these trees is 2 years to where they're really, safe. And so I had all this free resource. I had bags of leaves, so why not just entomb them in leaves, or, had some free plywood, free fence panels. That's an avocado in the top right. I was blocking the wind and putting water buckets at the trunk, just everything to try and protect them through their establishment when they were young. We take care of the kids. And then support trees, you already saw this list. So I've got like a tour of evolution over time. We can fly through, or we can just jump to questions. Lily, you gotta.
Do you have pictures of, I saw a few pictures of the property more developed. Do you have any more?
Yeah, let's go through this quickly. So you'll see the dates. This is kind of the first year, and the pond that got dug. And then it was just kind of like gardening in mulch, growing soil. Built that chicken run in the back, got all the chain link from it, from somebody needed it taken down, and it gradually evolved. So it was like a meadow. There were no big trees, but if you see right in the center of this shot, there's an apple tree. Like the trees were all small. That was the first 2 years of establishment. You saw there's a citrus.
Can you go back and point to that apple tree? You can use your mouse to point to stuff. Where is it?
This is an apple tree right here.
Are you going to keep it low so you can pick easily?
It actually was on a dwarfing rootstock, so it's only like 10 or 12 feet right now.
Okay.
It's a Dorset. And they're just off camera, or just off screen, is the other citrus. So yeah, just collecting resources. So March of 2015, that's 2 years in. This is a pineapple guava, and it was kind of like, this was the end of these veggie bed gardens where they were just getting overrun. I didn't want to mess with it. That's probably mostly arugula flowers, and so there was a big shift then towards planting fruit trees. I don't know if you can see this right here. So that's a citrus going in the middle of that vegetable bed. So I started shifting away from annuals, shifting just to perennials, but just maintaining it with pulses. So here's like the citrus tree is a little bigger, it's more established. There's definitely, like the apple would be back there, and there's 2 plum trees right here. This is a good example of nursing. So this is an ash tree that I left just to shade these 2 plum trees while it was young, and just to make it less brittle. So 2 years in, peaches are already producing, maintaining lawn. I do have lawn in my garden in a few spots. It's always tired at the end of the summer. This is that exact same apple tree. So from the first one, we're just looking back out towards the driveway. So there's a citrus right there. Just kind of how I'm letting it overgrow because it was still brittle. It was still dependent on the rains. Same citrus tree in the fall, goldenrod blooming.
Is that what you mean by brittle? Just
Brittle is an environment that, you know, like if it misses one rain, then a lot of things die, kind of thing. You know, it kind of feels on the edge. There's a tension when you're standing or walking through a brittle environment. Yeah, like kind of
So
picture, not
it
even
has
picture
not become, the roots have not become established. It cannot really take care of itself.
Well, I was actually talking about the environment, not the plants. The
Okay.
plants aren't brittle, but like the landscape was brittle, and it's mainly because so like in a desert, it doesn't feel brittle because everything there is very adapted and acclimated to that pulse. But in some places where the earth has been damaged or, you know, scarred, where it is stuck in grassland mode when it really wants to be a forest, there's a brittleness that you'll feel where the soil loses all its moisture, you know, as it's moving towards something. And if it's moving towards something, and something is lacking, it might, you know, fall off and drop. Anyway, you know, just more of a big pulse, you know, seeing trees come out and bags of leaves go in. So February, that's, what is that, 3 years in. So this is year 3. You can see I didn't plant, like this citrus is all newer plantings. This was a nectarine. This was just planted like probably that February, just before this image. So there was still trees going in for the first 3 years, 4 years. It didn't all happen all at once. That was a big thing. But more winter protection, you know, more community happened. It was kind of a phase. And those who know me, I actually am really bad. I'm about community. It's kind of just like my little hermitage now. But yeah, there were times, and there's community. And there was times for the hard freezes. 2017 and 2018 were both pretty brutal. So got to see like this right here, this citrus, you know, froze back real hard. That was in the image before, and just it bounced back really strong. So once they've gone through 2 years is a really great benchmark. If the tree's gone through 2 winters, you can call it established, and that thing can go through those 18-degree, you know, really cold weather, and it'll just come back from low on the trunk. As long as you're protecting the graft, protecting that bottom, you know, portion, it really responds quickly. And here you can see, if you see the arrow, the ash tree is pulsed out to give light to these 2 plums because they're ready for it now. They've been through a summer, they're established. You know, just more as I found materials, you know, for free, collected them, did other things. I liked when I used to have a lot more roses in the garden because there was a lot more sunlight. That's the same apple tree right there from the first image. So things grow slowly. I'd say I have, you know, I can't really push anything with irrigation. So there's usually a rest period in the summer. You know, this is a lot of moringa. There were a lot more, like if you saw in this image too, more cassava, moringa at first, just, you know, short-lived things, holding space and shading, making it more mild for the citrus to grow up and out. This is peach. These are, you know, trees that were there the very first year. So this is, you know, growing fast, and then, yeah, have a more expansion, more allowing, like that. This is pepper vine, kind of swamp things, and I'll come in and I'll just cut it all out real low and pull it out of the pineapple guava, and I'll do that maybe twice a year, you know, beginning of summer, end of summer.
That pineapple guava sure took off.
This has probably been, let's see, we're in 2017, but yeah, pineapple guava is not drought tolerant. That was the big thing. I lost a few, so the deep mulch really helped them to get going. But yeah, at this point, you know, just the 3 years in, or 4, excuse me, you know, there's starting to be a little bit of canopy, like on that fig tree there. January was the hard freeze, so I think this is just showing toasted moringa and cassava and all that. And that was time, more investment in infrastructure and other things. But things bounce back real quick. This is, you know, fig and blueberry and other things, but they're still like, this is just Chinese tallow, and it's just there because I'll cut it down at some point. But plenty of yields. Like it's hard to document them when they're in the landscape because they're all just fruit and food hiding out.
That's a cultivated elderberry, it looks like.
No, I don't have any cultivated elderberries.
Those are big elderberries.
The mulberries you're thinking of. Yeah.
I mean mulberry,
yeah,
excuse me.
It's Pakistan. It's an exceptional mulberry.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry.
And then, chickens have been running in the garden a lot. I started working more with the concrete when I had time, spreading mulch all the time. Built the annual vegetables, brought them back. So here and also over here are my two main annual veg beds that I brought back when I felt like the forest was stable and I didn't have to do so much. And there's just pulses, kind of like the winter weeds. I try and let all of the cleavers go to seed, the gallinum, and even henbit too. The chickens just love to eat it so much, so I want it to come back. And then after it's made a lot of seed, I'll just cover it with leaves, and keeps going.
I think if you want to just keep flipping and get to the present, we're running out of time.
Yeah, we're basically like 5 slides away from being done. But this is it. There's bees and there's always bags of leaves, and it's been fun to help it stabilize. It's like I don't have to worry about drought. I don't have to worry about freezes as much. I trust in a lot of the citrus that's out there that I'll probably put the water 5-gallon buckets around the trunk and maybe pack leaves down there, but I'm not covering these last few years. Not that we've had to, but there's not a lot to protect. And I've got big, avocado trees now, big citrus that can really protect itself. So that's basically it. I think this is and I have cats that like to hang out and my dog and stuff like that. So this is the last slide. It's basically a lot like this today. It goes through periods of when it's dry and it feels a little bit and then when the rains come, it feels you can feel the life in it. So that is it. And
that's fantastic. I'm really going to have to come see that. It's a private garden tour, $20 membership, limit 6.
Yeah, so I just wanted to explain, like, if anybody's interested in coming out to the garden, the garden is like, I'm framing it as like a private club just to protect from liability. You obviously have to be careful about that. I got 12 colonies out there, and so it's something where I'm happy to bring people out, but you want to connect with me and get more information about all that, just feel free to shoot me an email. But yeah, the 24th, I'm keeping that open in the morning. And so yeah, you're invited out. If you want to see the garden, just shoot me an email and we'll go from there.
Fantastic, Mickey. I don't know that we have a whole lot of time, but real quickly, remind me what a polyculture orchard was, because I couldn't really, I know what a poly means, I know what culture means, but I didn't get that concept on that slide.
An orchard with different species, that's all. A variety of different trees.
Greenbrier, if it's the one I'm thinking of, really has incredibly terrible thorns. What's the edible on that?
The edible is the tubers, and there are species that don't have thorns. So you could look in like a narrow leaf greenbrier. So there's some with smooth stems, but yes.
Okay. So the one I'm seeing is a wild one. You're saying there's a cultivated one, or there's a wild one without
No, there's a wild one without thorns, but actually some of the better edibility comes from the new shoots like asparagus. So because it has so much energy in the roots, if it ever gets cut down, it'll shoot up spears that are just like asparagus in tenderness. So you could you could cultivate it like that in the wild. Yeah.
I know this might not be the greatest question because your lifestyle is different than a lot of people, but about how many hours per week on average are you working to maintain that now that it's up, or
it's fluctuated
when you were building it?
Yeah, it's fluctuated a lot, but for sure like 20 hours a week at the beginning at least. I'd say now it's a lot less, but yeah, there was a lot of initial just desire to shape the landscape and to stay connected to all those plants was a lot of energy. So I don't have a good tally of it, but I would
Yeah.
say 20 feels like, a lot, or so it feels like that's probably pretty close. Whatever a lot is, I would go to
Yeah.
them every chance I got.
It's a lot, yeah. The other thing is that we stress a lot in permaculture, the design, the sitting back and observing and
Yeah,
and putting elements together. Did you do much of that?
I did, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I went through the Urban Harvest PDC in 2013,
Yeah, I remember
so
that. But
I
then you
had
mapped
plenty
it
of
out
time.
and there was a plan going into this.
Yeah, there was actually a plan before I even started the PDC, because I have a landscape architecture background.
Right.
But the plan was something that was always in my head. Like it's formed in my head. So even though it did get put on paper, it was always loose and just as malleable as it needed to be. Because I knew where the flows were. I knew where the chicken setback needed to be to keep them safe from city
Mhm.
whatever. But I knew where the water needed to be. But everything else really evolved from a knowledge of needs of the plants, as far as like planting things in a way to try and get them some winter protection, try and get them some shade, just kind of an arrangement sort of energy rather than a hard design kind of energy.
Right. But somebody who didn't have that horticultural background could use these lists and other lists to understand shade, what their need is for shade versus
Absolutely, yeah.
sun.
Pick those trees off of the best list. Start with those trees, and for every tree, plant a support tree about 4 feet to the west side of it. And just get more comfortable allowing mulch. Mulch on the surface is just, I can't really recommend it enough. But yeah, nurse trees, having other trees around gives we all do better with competition, a
Yeah,
little bit of competition.
for sure. And for that shade on that west side.
Yeah.
And where did you get all your mulch? Were you like the Finca Tres Robles and hooked up with Centerpoint?
No, I was much too small scale for that. I would say 70% of my mulch has come in bags of leaves in the back of my truck, and 30% has come in from tree service trimmings that I just flag down in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I'm very big and just like the universe guides me, and then you're in the right place at the right time. It's like, hey, I could use the mulch, and hey, they're 2 blocks away. So
Right.
that's how most of the mulch piles happen.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've pretty much answered most everything. If you did not see the presentation in the chat, I put it several times, but if you didn't see it because you came in later or whatever, please email me, Lily, Lilly, at urbanharvest.org, and I'll be happy to share that with you. Thanks, everybody, for coming out on Thursday early evening, and thank you, Mickey. It was, if you're seeing it on the screen, lots of thanks to you. Do you see that popping up on your screen?
Oh yeah. Oh man,
Yeah.
lots of questions.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I don't have running water.
Yeah,
still.
if you don't have the chat, it's they're thanking you. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you coming out and being interested, and Mickey for being just a pioneer in a lot of ways, even for your young age. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry about not getting to all the questions, so you can totally email me if you want.
Yeah, I was answering a lot of them as we went, and
okay, cool.
Not revisiting it again.
Cool.
All right, y'all. Thanks again. Email me, Mickey.
Yeah, I will do.
Okay. Bye, y'all.